quiet hum of the refrigerator was the loudest sound in our apartment tonight, a steady drone that mirrored the monotony I felt, settling deep within my bones. David was asleep beside me, his breathing even and peaceful. I envied his peace. I envied his sleep. For weeks, perhaps even months, my own nights had been restless, haunted by a secret that felt too heavy to carry, and too dangerous to confess. Our story, David's and mine, began like so many others. A whirlwind of laughter, stolen glances, and promises whispered under starlit skies. We built a life together, brick by painstaking brick, a cozy home, filled with shared dreams and a comfortable rhythm. We had our rituals, our inside jokes, our favorite coffee mugs. We were in love, or so I believed for a very long time. Somewhere along the way, the colors faded. Not all at once, but gradually, imperceptibly, like a photograph, left too long in the sun. The passionate debates turned into silent agreements. The curious questions about each other's day became polite nods. We were two ships sailing parallel courses, never quite colliding, never quite connecting. I felt an emptiness bloom inside me, a silent, aching void that no amount of comfortable routine could fill. I blamed myself, initially thinking I was ungrateful for the good man I had, the stable life we shared. But the feeling persisted, a cold knot of loneliness, even when David was right there next to me. Then Mark walked into my life. He wasn't a whirlwind. He was a gentle breeze, a subtle shift in the atmosphere. We met at a work conference, an industry event, filled with forced smiles and lukewarm coffee. Mark was different. He listened. He truly listened, not just waiting for his turn to speak, but absorbing every word, every nuance. He saw me, or at least I felt he did, in a way David hadn't in years. He noticed the way I bit my lip when I was thinking hard, the way my eyes sparkling when I talked about my passion for forgotten literature. He made me feel seen. He made me feel interesting. He made me feel alive again. It started innocently enough, emails about work, then texts that drifted into personal territory. Late-night conversations about dreams and fears, things I hadn't shared with David in ages. There was an electric current between us, a dangerous spark that promised something exhilarating and forbidden. My heart pounded every time his name appeared on my phone screen, a mixture of fear and anticipation. I knew I was playing with fire, but the warmth of that flame after so much cold felt irresistible. The first time it happened was after a particularly stressful week at work. We had met for drinks, ostensibly to discuss a project. One drink led to another, laughter flowed freely, and the world outside the bar seemed to melt away. His hand brushed mine across the table, and a jolt went through me. My carefully constructed walls began to crumble. Later that night, in a quiet corner of the city, far from my safe, familiar life with David, our lips met. It was a kiss that tasted of freedom and forbidden desire, a desperate attempt to fill the gaping hole within me. The immediate aftermath was a dizzying cocktail of emotions, a rush of adrenaline, a profound sense of guilt, a fleeting moment of exhilaration. I drove home in a haze, the silence of my car amplifying the pounding in my chest. Slipping back into our apartment, into our bed next to David, felt like an act of profound hypocrisy. His innocent, sleeping face was a mirror reflecting my own betrayal. I wanted to rewind time to erase that moment, to be the person I was before. But the deed was done, a permanent stain on my conscience. The affair with Mark was not a passionate romance in the traditional sense. It was a series of clandestine meetings, stolen moments, where we tried to recreate that initial spark, that feeling of being truly seen and desired. Each encounter was followed by an even deeper wave of regret and self-loathing. I hated myself for what I was doing, for the lies I was weaving, for the double life I was leading. My mind became a battlefield of conflicting desires and gnawing guilt. I would look at David sometimes, his eyes full of uncomplicated affection, and feel a sharp pang of pain. He deserved better. He deserved honesty. The lies became exhausting. Every casual question from David about my day felt like an interrogation. I started fabricating small details, inventing fictional meetings, or altered schedules. My memory became a labyrinth of truths and falsehoods, a constant struggle to keep my story straight. The easy intimacy we once shared evaporated, replaced by a tense awkwardness. I became distant, irritable, short-tempered. David noticed. He asked if I was all right if something was bothering me. I would brush him off with a vague excuse, a headache, work stress, anything to avoid confronting the truth. The truth was that I was a coward. I was afraid to admit what I had done. I was afraid to shatter David's trust, to break his heart, to demolish the life we had painstakingly built. But more than that, I was afraid of the emptiness that might return if I let go of Mark. It was a toxic cycle, a self-destructive pattern I seemed unable to break free from. The guilt was a constant companion, a heavy cloak that weighed me down every waking moment. It seeped into everything: my work, my friendships, my very sense of self. I was no longer Sarah. I was merely the sum of my lies. One evening, David sat me down. His eyes were not angry, but filled with a quiet despair that cut me deeper than any shouting ever could. He said he felt like he was losing me, that I was a stranger living in our home. He asked what was wrong. His voice was gentle, almost pleading. In that moment, looking into his kind, bewildered eyes, something inside me snapped. The dam broke. All the carefully constructed walls I had built around my secret collapsed. The words tumbled out, a torrent of confession, raw and unedited. I told him everything about the emptiness, the feeling of being unseen, about Mark, about the affair. Each word was a dagger, piercing not only his heart, but my own. His face crumpled. The quiet despair transformed into utter devastation. I watched his world shatter before my eyes, and I was the one holding the hammer. The days and weeks that followed were a blur of tears, pain, and accusation. There were long, agonizing conversations where every word was steeped in bitterness and betrayal. He asked me why. I tried to explain the emptiness, the feeling of being lost, but even as I spoke, the words felt hollow, inadequate excuses for such a profound violation of trust. There was no justification for what I had done. There was only the brutal reality of its impact. David moved out. He needed space, he said, to process, to heal. Our apartment, which once felt so full of life and love, now echoed with emptiness. Every corner, every object, every shared memory became a painful reminder of what I had destroyed. The silence was deafening, a constant testament to my failure. In the solitude, I was forced to confront myself. There was no Mark to distract me, no David to lie to. Just me and the wreckage of my choices. I dug deep into the why, not just the immediate triggers, but the deeper currents of discontent within me. I realized that while I blamed the lack of spark in our relationship, part of the problem lay within my own inability to communicate my needs. I had sought validation outside when I should have been honest inside. I had taken the easy, seductive path of external gratification instead of the harder path of internal reflection and difficult conversation. The shame was immense, but slowly, it began to transform into something else, something akin to a grim determination. I understood that forgiveness would not come easily, if at all, from David. But I had to find a way to forgive myself, not to excuse my actions, but to learn from them. I started therapy, a long and arduous journey of self-discovery. I learned about my own insecurities, my fear of vulnerability, my tendency to avoid conflict. I learned that my actions were a symptom of deeper, unresolved issues within myself, not just a reaction to a fading relationship. It has been a year now since David left. We are no longer together. Our story ended not with a whimper, but with a bang, a catastrophic collision caused by my own hand. The pain still lingers, a dull ache that reminds me of the profound cost of betrayal. But there is also a fragile new beginning. I am rebuilding my life brick by painstaking brick, this time focusing on honesty, on self-awareness, on true connection. I am learning to sit with discomfort, to face difficult truths, to communicate openly even when it is terrifying. I often think of David. I hope he is healing. I hope he finds happiness. I carry the weight of my actions, but I also carry the lessons they taught me. Infidelity is not just about a physical act, it is about a breach of trust, a tearing apart of a shared reality, a deep wound inflicted on someone you once loved. It is a lonely path, a path paved with guilt and regret. But even in the deepest shadows there is a glimmer of light, the possibility of growth, the chance to become a better, more honest, more resilient human being. And that is the painful but ultimately hopeful truth I carry with me now.